For sure.
Now we're all talking when the show starts.
And we're live. Welcome back to Corona Geek, here where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and we're having too much fun today. We've decided that we want a $5 data plan. and we want to stream all of our content to our television so we can watch it from our living room couch.
And never have to get up while we're doing development.
And never have to. Oh, there's another thing that we didn't talk about is that when you stream content to your Apple TV or to your Android device, whatever, you can use your big 50-inch television as a monitor. You can do that with Apple TV. You can use it. You use your your television as a second monitor, which is like, I don't know, really geeky, but it's fun, you know.
But then you're fighting kids over who's going to watch Frozen, or is Dad going to develop mobile apps? Or
well, you know, for that screen size though, you can go picture in picture, right? You can just bring up a window and put Frozen over here, and then you can put code over there.
Sorry, kids, I got to move it over to the other side. I'm trying to debug this code. Yeah,
that's right. Dad, could you move your simulator? It's in front of Frozen.
This is the thing. I can see Greg doing this.
What do you think's paying for this movie?
That's right. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, today we're going to talk about JSON oddities. Last week we kind of dug into JSON a little bit, and this week Ed Maurina from Roaming Gamer is going to tell us the odd bits of JSON and how we can kind of get around those things.
And who better?
Yeah.
It's all about the odd bits.
Yeah, it's all about the odd bits.
Yes, great, wonderful. Let me minimize my stuff and get this screen going.
Well, also we're going to talk about shuffling Lua table items, and we're going to look at widget themes if we get a chance. Before we get into all of that, though, let's go through and do a few announcements. Let me scroll through here, scrolling, and there's a new public release out, if you guys hadn't seen that already. 25.11 is out.
Yep.
It supports adaptive content scaling. Windows Phone 8 support is available via Corona cards. It also has support for Yosemite. Yay! And also support for iOS 8 and 8.1, and support for iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus, the biggies.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys tried Corona cards yet for the Windows Phone 8? Have you played with that yet?
No time.
Brian, you have?
Yeah, I've played with it a little bit. I've got a couple that I'm hoping to release to it pretty soon. It'll be a Christmas break project.
You get a break at Christmas? Man,
yeah, isn't that nice?
You get a break?
At all.
Just for my day.
I don't know why I have to put Christmas on the end of that. That doesn't make any difference when it is.
So Brian, you're asking if people have had any problems with SQLite using the new public release?
Yeah, I've experienced a problem. One of my students experienced a problem with SQLite on the new public release, and I was just seeing if anybody else had it. I've already submitted a problem ticket on it.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
What do you know? What his problem? What was his problem?
Yeah, describe his problem.
I got to think back. That was before the weekend.
Okay. Well, if you think of what it is, let us know, because we definitely.
Yeah, it was a problem that definitely did not exist before this public release, because we ran it perfectly on the pre-public release, and then when the public release came out, we were unable to insert a new row into an existing table.
Well,
On a device.
That'd be a fairly important thing to be able to do.
That was kind of an important one. So yeah, I've already submitted a problem ticket, but I was just wondering, and it was something that we did not experience on the previous public release. So obviously, was kind of an important one, but I haven't heard back yet on it. Of course, I just submitted it on Thursday. I didn't expect a real quick response. I'm sure there's other higher priority problems, but this is kind of an important one if you're using the public release. We just downgraded to the previous public release and didn't have a problem.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing to highlight there is that you don't necessarily, well, one, if you're using the public release, you're either using this public release or the previous public release. But if you're a daily subscriber, or if you're a subscriber, pro subscriber, you get access to daily builds. So you
Which you should be.
Yes,
which you should be. Yeah.
Which you should be.
You should be, and hopefully, if we get some time later, I want to show a screen here where that shows all the daily builds that are out there, and kind of give people an idea of what you're not getting access to if you're not a pro subscriber, because there's stuff coming out all the time. It's not just these public releases whenever they become available.
Other benefits
it's
too.
daily.
Oh, wait,
there are other benefits.
There's more.
There's more. And if you act now, I tell you, one of my favorite things on this public release is that the Corona terminal on the Mac pops open whenever you whenever you launch the Corona simulator. The terminal window comes up. So just like it did with Windows, right? Ed, you're familiar with that. You're the Windows guy. So
yeah, I couldn't live without that. I got so sick of that on OS 10.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
We do it. But you used to have to force it to happen.
Right.
Well, and in my textbooks, I always recommended launch the terminal so it would launch the simulator so that you would have the terminal. But now that's kind of a moot issue. But the terminal window is so valuable, no matter what editor you're using. It's for troubleshooting. It's your go-to tool.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. So now it's called Corona Console. So it's all kind of just one thing, which is cool. And then there's a bunch of simulator, iOS, and widget bug fixes, and then they're all documented.
Yosemite and native for Yosemite and just all kinds of cool stuff. So
yeah. So
which is why we were upgrading.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes to that, but because it's pages worth of stuff that was put out in this release. So definitely go check that out.
Well, I'm really disappointed that Sergey's not here to tell me that I'm wrong.
Oh yeah. Well,
so you're right.
He might come.
His silence. You're wrong.
His silence consent, is that what we're saying?
Sorry.
Well, he may be here later.
Okay.
Okay. So last week we talked on Corona 116. We talked about encoding URLs. Like I said, we also talked about a little bit of JSON, and we actually had an unplanned, unscheduled hidden secrets of Clash of Clans. We spent like half the show talking about the psychology and game mechanics of Clash of Clans.
And we will go back there again on a future date.
Oh yes, I absolutely.
We have plans.
Yeah, it's a great game. Also, and we talked a little bit last time about Corona University. So if you have been out there, there's 100+ videos out there to check out. And if you're looking for a good searchable resource for Corona development, you need to go over to burtonsmediagroup.com and use the coupon code Corona Geek to save 20% off of your purchase, because Dr. Burton's got a bunch of Corona books out there, and they're all digital, so you can search for things. This is what I absolutely love. The one that is sitting on top of five technical books that are all outdated, that I can't search through, but Dr. Burton's put all his in digital form, and he updates them on a regular basis when new things become available, and you can also search it. So if you're like, it's in this API, I think I can remember, and you can do a search and find it, like all the instances where it's.
And I had a great example of that just this last week. I had a student working on their final term project and needed to be able to do a closure, which I talked about in Chapter 16 of the Beginning Mobile Application Development, how to do a closure, what they are, why you would use it. Basically it comes down to a closure is needed when you're calling a internal function that it needs parameters passed to it. But if you're passing it a parameter and wanting to do it on a timer delay, it immediately executes because you're passing parameters. So that's the reason why you use a closure in that situation. So, I just told him search on closure, it's right there. He found it, resolved the problem in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I tell you, digital is the only way that I get my books anymore.
Me too, especially technical books.
Especially technical books, and just for that feature. But I tell you that I just want to make it clear that although technical books are great for searching material, the fact that Dr. Burton keeps all of his material up to date is important, because I've purchased plenty of digital books that are now out of date. They're searchable.
Say that again?
but they're out of date, so it's important.
I have shelves full of out-of-date books, so if I can't get it digital anymore, I don't even bother.
Yeah,
It's going to be out of date before I receive it.
All right, there you go. So burtonsmediagroup.com. We'll put a link in the show notes, but don't forget to use Corona Geek. It'll save you some money and get the information that you need at the same time. All right, one other announcement here is that this week is the last week we will be playing Dr. Spin, which is actually put out by Code Delivery Boy. We've had, that's the duo that we've had. We have Scott Shapiro on before and his partner in crime, and they have volunteered Dr. Spin game as the game that we're going to play this month, and they've provided some promo codes. So if you haven't checked on social media, on all the Corona Geek channels, look for that promo code. I've got three or four more left I'm going to be giving out this week, but basically you have to play the game, collect as many Zetas as you can, get the highest score that you can, and then go over to the Corona Geek Facebook page and post a screenshot of your high score on the wall. And then on December 1st, which is next Monday, we're going to pick a we're going to pick a winner to get a $50 gift card. We're going to pick a $50 gift card to get a winner. So be sure to check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes to the game. Go check it out. It's a lot of fun. And one final note here before we see if there's any community announcements from the panel here. We've got daily docs have been updated. The look and feel is more modern now. Have you guys noticed that? Have you been in the documentation lately? It's flat now. It's the whole flat is the new rounded, and it's all flat now, and I think it's cleaner.
Round is the new square.
Yeah, round is the new square. It's I think it's easier to find things. It's just less visual distraction, and it's good. So go check that out if you haven't been there in a while. Go check out docs.coronalabs.com/daily, and again, become a pro subscriber.
I don't know, if you haven't been there in a while and you're asking questions, this could be a problem.
This could be a problem. Well, sometimes you forget to go to the docs for things. I mean, you look for tutorials on the blog, or maybe you go to the forums and ask questions. But
function calls in the docs have at least one good example to go with them.
Yeah, copy paste for sure. Does anybody on the panel have any announcements? Anything going on?
Got anything going on? Got nothing going on.
You got nothing going on. You got plenty going on. You got so much going on. You don't even want to talk about what.
Going on.
You can't solve.
Don't look over there. Yeah.
You mentioned the Clash of Clans. We do have a Corona Geek research Clash of Clans guild or clan. If anybody wants to join it, it's called Corona Geek. So we're not competitive in there. We're just helping each other learn about game development from a playing standpoint for multiplayer. So please feel free to join us. It's open to anybody.
Awesome. Yeah. My clan is waning, and so I may come over and spend some time in there just to beef things up a little bit, and mix things up. Ed, you didn't have anything else you wanted to talk about? No. Greg, did you have anything?
The moment I do this, my phone rings.
Your phone rings.
Greg, no, nothing Corona related.
You redid your website though, didn't you?
I did. I redid gpanimations.com and mattybears.com just because I released a tutorial series on Construct 2, so that's why I didn't mention it. It's not really Corona, but just because of that, I figured I'd better update my site. So then I did that one. Then I might as well just do Matty Bear 2 while I'm at it. So just
cool. Did you have any updates on the? You were trying to get your app onto the Android TV?
No, I haven't gotten that to work, and I've also made an HTML5 game that works with like a USB game controller, and I published that to the Android TV, and that doesn't work either. And then I got an email from Amazon saying that my Amazon Fire TV game isn't compatible with the new Fire TV stick, and they want me to change that as well. So I'm having a lot of problems with TV devices lately.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the stick is a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
All right, well-
I think you got an echo in Greg's end.
Yeah.
When
He's
you talk, it goes and it echoes on. Yeah.
he's got it. He's muted it.
Not,
Yeah. What is that? What did the DJ say? Sir, could you turn your radio down?
And then I can't hear what you're saying. I can't hear myself.
All right. Well, here's a few more tips from the community. Some random stuff. Kevin from Seaburn Games says, don't include the word beta in your app, or Apple will reject it. He just not that his app was in beta, just the word beta was in his app. So I think that's interesting. Careful of that if you're including something, you want to make a...
You're not Google. You don't get a call Gmail beta for 3 years.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was just the word beta was in the text of his app, so I thought that was interesting. He said you can't even say beta in the app, so I don't know how you would do that if you were writing a story about like beta goldfish or something. What is it?
Yeah. I'm going to make a game called Beta 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 now.
It's a Greek fraternity.
Oh, well, there you go. What if you had a fraternity app, whatever that word is, an app that you get rejected right away, I guess. And then That's So Panda in the forum says that he's been converting his apps to Windows Store, and he's had a link on the Windows Phone for a while, the WindowsPhone.com for a while. He says, but his apps haven't been showing up in the store when they're searching for the actual Windows device. So he says, I've contacted Windows, and their support team stated that a lot of new app submissions in the past couple of weeks have been affected. Their response is they are aware of the issue and they're checking into possible resolution. And he says if you've submitted an app to Windows in the past couple of weeks, that you recommend that you check to see that your app is actually showing up in the store. And if it's not, contact Microsoft or Windows as soon as possible. And he says, I don't believe the issue is in a Corona issue. Just wanted to pass it along as public's what do you call it? PSA, public service announcement. So if you're publishing and you're not seeing your app show up, don't think that it'll eventually show up. Maybe something on their end. And then Brent says in the forums, he says, if you're encountering performance issues on Windows Phone 8, it's most likely caused by display.newText or a similar text rendering feature, which are slow on that platform, especially if the text is created or updated frequently. So the recommended solution is to use a bitmap font library, and he says please follow the guide for more details, and then he links to the Corona Cards WP8. There's an optimizing text performance guide in there, which we'll put a link in the show notes for. So if you're experiencing issues there, go check out the guide.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I have a guy who writes me for help. This is not a suggestion to those who are listening now. I won't be responding to everybody who writes for help. But this one individual, a kid who is trying to get into game development, he writes me occasionally for help, and he was having trouble with the Windows 8 cards.
Oh, maybe that'll help him out.
Well, I told him to use, anyway, same advice, and he said it was a night and day performance difference. So
there you go. Well, send all your hate mail to ed at readthedocumentation.com.
Never to be on this show again.
And here's a link to his to the Google map that shows his home address.
You've crossed the line now, my friend. You've crossed the line.
I guess I should wait till you tell us about JSON before I publish that.
Hey, I got a random item for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have we on this show, I don't recall having done so, but maybe I've forgotten. Have we ever talked about developing apps? Yeah, we talked about that. Developing apps for grants.
For grants?
Yeah, like government grants or other kinds of grants.
No.
Getting grants for development. Because I have a client that I'm talking to who is they want to do their work. They want me to do some work for them, possibly, and they're trying to get a government grant to pay for it. And it occurred to me, why should I wait for clients to get government grants? Why can't I go out and look for them myself? So
yeah, why not?
Nobody listening's ever done that, but I don't even know how to start looking.
The whole grant process, of course, that's a big part of higher education. Is we do everything with grants if at all possible. But yeah, that's a huge topic of research, especially if you're going to be working with a higher education or a K-12 organization. There are tons of grants available for being able to do mobile app development. But usually you have to be paired with a educational or nonprofit organization to go after the majority of grants that are available. Though there are non or later type grants. Most states
so
have
I
some.
thought of that. I thought, okay, these grants are going to be associated with educational institutions, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't still identify a grant and then partner with a local community college or whatever to do that portion, to fulfill that requirement.
Right. And if we want to do this as a topic one day, I'll be happy to share what I know about grant development and doing it. It's questionable whether or not it's worth the time and energy to do grants. It is a very time-consuming process. It's kind of like doing the lottery.
Like anything when you work with the government, right?
Exactly. So.
Except there's no lottery from the government.
But if you're going with a smaller state or local startup type grant situation, that can be much easier to get. It's the federal grants that are worth millions of dollars that everybody wants, that are very competitive to get.
Okay. Anyway, I just had this wild thought.
Yeah. I'll be happy to share what I know about it on a future show, or we can dive right in right now.
It would be interesting to see how you could marry that with this open data policy, government data, and having access to records, and it would be interesting to see how you could marry all those things together. I mean,
yeah, the majority of grants are either the science founded, arts, or education oriented. That's where you're going to find the majority. Of course. What would be the perfect grant is get something from Bill and Melinda Gates to develop for the iOS system.
Oh, I want military grants.
Oh, military.
Those are the big buck grants. Forget about these educational grants.
So you're going after the drone market then, huh?
Hey, whatever, man. All I'm talking about is money.
Yeah.
You just want to go after the money market. Okay, got it. Well, I put a link in the chat there to lesgo.com. Remember that guy? Had the question marks on his suit. Remember that guy? Mm-hmm. I knew. I could tell his face right away. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Lesgo, and he had these a suit with question marks on it. And he's all about getting government grants and government programs, and he has a whole book that he used to publish. I think he still does. I don't know. Anyway. He pretty much figured out how to compile. As I understand it, he figured out how to compile a book about all the different government programs that you could get, and then he sells that book. So
I like his website where he's got a button that's got my name on it. It says easy money. Lost Charles here.
Oh, Easy Money. Is that your name, Easy Money?
That's my other name.
Ed Easy Money.
AKA Easy Money.
All right. Well, hey, why don't you tell us about some of the odd bits of JSON so we can make that grant money.
Roger that. So can you see my screen? And is it legible?
Yes and yes.
Okay, good. So last week we were talking about basically saving and restoring tables as JSON files on the persistent storage of your device, on the disk, what I like to call the disk. So the premise here is that you have data that you want to retain from run to run of your application, and an easy way to do that is to store it in a table, save it to the disk, and when the game is restored or at a future date when you need that data, to reload it from the disk. And the intermediary for this is the JSON encoder, which is, I don't need to go into what JSON is, but it's a nice format. I see it drinking, Charles, even though the screen is on me. I have Charles's camera up still here, and I see Charles leaning back and getting a nice drink of water there. Okay, so last week we talked about this, and I believe we discussed an article, a blog. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was a tutorial on saving and loading Lua tables with JSON.
Right, right. And at that time, I said that it was a great example, except the one thing the blog didn't do is it didn't discuss a few cases that catch people by surprise when they save JSON encoded tables and then restore them. So I came up with an example of 3 gotchas, and then as I was making this example, and this is where I was making my joke about Sergey disagreeing with me, is that one of the things that I think used to be a problem is no longer a problem.
And what was that?
And I'll show you examples. The 3 problems that I thought existed, 2 of which still do, is a numerically indexed table which has gaps. So for example, you have a Lua table where it has entry 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, missing entry 5, and then has an entry 6. It used to be that if you tried to save that with JSON encoding and restore it, that the indexes would be messed up. That is no longer true. Surprisingly, it works perfectly now. The second problem is if you use a table that uses mixed indices. So in Lua, tables can have numeric indices, 1, 2, 3, 4, or they can have key value pairs, which is, for example, a string or a table as an index, or basically any valid Lua object can be used as an index to reference a stored value in the table, which makes it very powerful as a storage unit for your games, because then you can, for example, create tables of objects where the objects themselves are the indices in the table, which makes it easy to remove them later on. But that's neither here nor there. The point is as soon as you mix indices and you JSON encode that and then decode it with JSON, what happens is all of the indices that used to be numbers get converted to strings. JSON doesn't understand mixed pair table indices. So once it sees any string, it assumes they are all strings, and so it recodes them as strings on the restore.
So then your 1 becomes a string 1, is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So if you were using numeric indices in your game, and you said, get me entry 1, and used the number 1, then you save that table, restore that table, and then you said, get me index 1, there would be no index 1. You'd have to say, get me index quote 1, unquote 1. Give the string. But I'll show you how to fix this. And then the third problem is when people start to get advanced with Lua, one of the things they like to do is create objects or classes. And these are 2 different things. But when I say object, what I'm saying is a Lua table that has data attached to it, either using key value pairs or numeric indices, and functions. For example, you could create a table and attach a function called dump, and then that function's job would be to print out the contents of the table. For example, just as a random example of a function attached to a table. The problem is once you attach functions, or you modify the meta table, or you do any of these advanced things that you can do with Lua tables, and you try to save that, you're going to run into problems when you JSON encode and then JSON decode that table. It's going to mess up your indices, you're going to lose data, and it may not even actually work during the save step. So I'm going to give you, first of all, gotcha number 1. I'll just show you that it works. So as you can see here, what I've got is there's example code that goes with our discussion today, which is going to be available from a link in the show notes. And in this example, there's a main Lua file, which has some code to run the 3 different gotcha examples. And then there are 3 files, gotcha 1, gotcha 2, and gotcha 3, which are little snippets of code that show the problem. And what I've done is I've created basically modules. So each of these files is a module. and they expose function init, which is to set up the problem, test, which is to demonstrate things generally working, and then save and load, which is to save the table, restore the table, and then later we'll run test again, and test will usually fail. And there may be Gotcha 2 and Gotcha 3 have more functions in them, and I'll explain them as I go along. And the other two things that are in this is I included a file called tlib and tlib2. And tlib is a module that allows you, it shows you very basic functions for saving and loading tables to the disk or to the persistent storage.
No, and you the link that you provided me earlier, the repo link,
Yes.
has all this in it, right?
It has all this in it.
Okay.
Now these tlib, these save and loads are very similar to the ones from the blog post, but they're not the same code. They do the same thing, but I borrowed this code from somebody else a long time ago, and I've been using it, so I decided to just stick with it. So it's similar, but not exactly the same. tlib2 is exactly the same code as tlib1, but it has solutions in it to solve the problems that we are encountering. For example, it has a function in here to repair broken indices, so numeric indices that have been converted to strings. And it has a function in here, which I'll elaborate on in a moment, that handles the case where you try to save an object. And in a nutshell, what this does is it's called deep strip copy, and what it does is it goes through the table and it removes everything that it knows it's not going to be able to JSON encode. So links to functions, metatable indices, things like that, gone. It takes them all out, and it doesn't modify your original table. It creates a copy, and then you're using that and saving that data to the disk. So you retain your original, but you save everything that you can possibly save from the what was previously an unsavable table. Okay, so I'm just going to run Gotcha 1, and then I'll bring up, what I'll do here is I'll show you the code, and then I'll bring up the console. So all of the output for this example comes up in the console, which is going to be a little bit hard to read because I can't make the text bigger in this case.
So Gotcha number 1 was the numeric gap index.
Right, so just to elaborate here, in the initialize function what I do is I create a table, an empty table, and then at index 1, 2, 3, 4 I put some strings, and then I've commented this out, but index 3 has nothing, or index 5, I'm sorry, has nothing assigned to it, and then index 6 has another string. So what the test does is it simply uses a for loop to iterate over that table, and it goes through the number of entries in the table, and it prints out each entry, which was a surprise. Now previously, I'm almost sure of this, in a previous version incarnation of Corona, when you did this, I believe you would only get entries 1 through 4. Now, surprisingly, it correctly goes through the table, and when it encounters one that is empty, it just returns nil, which is the correct action. That's what you would expect to occur.
So is Corona now using the nil or the null fill-in if a table item is not there? Or
well, it's been using Lua 5.2 for some time now.
Right.
And I don't know if this was something...
That may be a Lua change, yeah.
Yeah, it might be like a Lua 5.21, something like that change. So, but I'm almost sure about a couple years ago when I first put together SSK, which includes this, that this whole thing fell apart, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah,
well,
I remember my early demos on using JSON tables that I had to do some null insertion and things like that. So I think this is a correction.
Handle return nils or blank indices, etc., like that. Yeah, so, like I said, this is going to be a little hard to read, but what happens here is the test goes through and it iterates over, and it prints out the strings, which were the next entry is, followed by a gap. And at this point, I expected it to fail, and it did not. Instead, it prints out nil, which is what I consider to be the correct behavior.
Yes.
And then it continues on as if there's no problem. It gets to the end of the table and prints out the sixth one, which is can reach this entry in an indexed loop, question mark, which at that point I was wondering. So let me uncomment this just to prove that there's no more problem. So then the next thing I do in the example is I save the table, I load the table, and then I run the test again. And actually, it looks like I've already got that code. Already got that code. So you can see here it says saving table to file, loading table from file, which are comments that are printed out by my testing functions. And then it iterates back over the test, and everything works wonderfully. So gotcha 1, not a problem. So we can just skip past that. This next one, however, is a major issue. People run into this all the time in the forums. So this, again, is the case where we have created a table that has numeric indices, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we use a key value pair. So in this case, I called it value, but I could have called it Bob or anything I wanted to. And let me just undo that. So in this case, value, the key, indexes an entry in the table and has the value stored. This is a key value pair entry. So when you run this, the test is to iterate using for numeric indexing. And what's going to happen here, actually I can't remember if it works at all. Let's just run it and see what we get. Sorry. This is what happens when you're live demoing. Okay, yes. So you run it, and what it does is it prints out this table mixes index types, which is, if we look at the code, the first 5 entries. Clearly, numeric indexing has no concept of a key value pair, so it skips this entry here. If we wanted to print this out, we would have to use the for kv in pairs, or the pairs iterator. And for the purposes of this example, I've included another tool which I think people should have in their arsenal, which is the dump utility, which I did not write, but I modified to make it a little bit more useful. And what it does is it dumps out the contents of a table, a single level table. So not a table with tables within it and tables within it. That's a multi-level table. Like, for example, people like to make multiple dimension arrays.
Yes.
And that's a table with tables. This will only print out the first level of a table. And I have another, in SSK, I have another utility that prints out a recursive table, but that's not something we should go into for this example. So dumping. The value of the dump function is that it prints out the contents of your table. It tells you what types the keys are. Are they strings? Are they functions? Are they what kind of a key is it? And then it prints out the associated value that is indexed by that key and tells you the type of that value. It also makes dumping tables simple. It's just a single line. For example, test 2 in this module is just tlib2.dump and my table. And then if I run that, and I comment out the original test function, I'll get is a nice printout here. It may be a little bit hard to read, but it says table dump, and then it goes through the indices. And this is where my dump is a little better. This sounded terrible. My dump function is a little better than the one that you find out in the Lua recipes, in that mine sorts. Whew, big deal. But I used to really bother me that the other one didn't sort, so I modified this one to sort the entries, and it will first, and then every key value pair after that sorted alphabetically. So it just makes it a little bit easier, because one of the things that is a problem with the pairs iterator is run to run. You never know what order they're going to come out in, which is great if you don't care, but it's terrible if you want to do them in an order, which is why people choose numerically ordered in the first place. So as a hint, if you need to do numerically ordered and key value pairs, but you really want your key value pairs to be alphabetical, take the dump code from my example and use it for your iterator for your game. Hint, hint. So anyways, the value here is, the key to this example is it's gone through, it's printed out all the contents of the table, the numerically indexed contents and the key value pair content, which is this is a key value pair entry. So let's look at our problem. Let's go ahead and leave that commented out. And let's do the save and the load. And let's just go ahead and try to run the test function. No, let's run the test2 function, which is the dump. So we're going to initialize the table with key value pairs and numeric indices. We're going to save it, load it, and test it. And I will tell you now that we're not going to get that far. Liar. Oh no, I take it back. Let's run test 1, which is the numerically indexed for I equals number of entries. So what happens is we save the table, we load the table, and then the function that's supposed to iterate over it and print out the contents prints nothing. Why? If we run test 2, we'll see why. If you look at this carefully, let me run test 2 before the save and after the save, just to clarify this. So before the save, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were numbers. But as I said, because you've mixed key value pair with numeric indices, after the save and load, everything is a string. 1 string, 2 string, 3 string, which means that these are, the only way to access these is to put quotes around. Or you can use this function. Let me bring it up again. This is the problem with running one screen. I have another test function in this module, gotcha2, which is called test3. And what it does is before it iterates over the table, it runs the tlive2 repair indices function, whose job it is to find all numerically indexed values that have been encoded as strings, not values, keys, and convert those keys back to numbers. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so save and rerun, and I probably should put a little gap thing here so we can separate this. All right. Okay, this is a flaw. This is a flaw. It's a good thing though. I'm glad this. So you can see now that we've got a number value and a string value. Actually, what I should have done is delayed this. Oh goodness sake.
Is it because there's two test2s?
Well, no. There's a limitation to this technique. So what this technique does is it looks at the table, it uses pairs to iterate over it, it finds an entry where the key is actually supposed to be a number, it creates a new entry with that number, and then it removes the old one by assigning nil to it. But it cannot do that while it's iterating. That's against the rules. Lua will lose its mind if you try to iterate and clear a key at the same time. So what I do, I'll show you the code. What I do, and this is the disclaimer to this method, and actually I wish Sergey were here because he might actually have a better solution. I do have better solutions, but they're not as straightforward as this. Where is it? What it does is it waits 1 millisecond, which ends up being waiting until the next frame, before it does the clear. If I did this, which is, let's try this. Create the new entry by converting the key to a number. Clear the old entry by setting it to nil. Hopefully maybe this will work. I don't know. It's been a while. So right now. Oh, hey, what do you know? Bad coding on my part, and I gotta upload some new code. So I take it all back. let's hand wave that last 2 minutes of me talking. No problems whatsoever with this technique. It all works. The point of our example here is, what did it do? It took what used to be strings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it fixed them. So now we can iterate over them with numeric iterators, which is what we wanted. We wanted to retain our original numeric iteration system. Okay, phew. Finding little problems and things I make mistakes too. How's that?
Well, I think those are good to highlight.
Well, as I was telling you that what the problem was this. It was the ordering of my code. Like an idiot, I cleared the old entry before I restored it. And this iterator, I think internally the iterator isn't quite smart enough to retain that V. I'm not sure why. This should actually work. I mean, as I look at this should be no different than this. But for some reason, earlier today, that failed. So use the new order. I will upload this code before the show ever goes out and the link goes out, and nobody will have this problem. It will work just fine.
Awesome.
The key here, one thing I do warn people about, is the deep strip copy, this function, is recursive. So if you have a table with tables with tables with tables, and one of those tables links back to another table that's higher up, it will go into an infinite loop, and you will get a crash where you exceed the, what is it called? I can't remember it, but it's the table that allows you to do recursion. It's basically the table that allows you to go back to the calling function. The stack, the heap. You'll exceed your heap. So be careful about recursive tables. You can't save them, you can't iterate them safely unless you're very careful and know what you're looking for. Okay, gotcha 3. So you're an advanced coder now. You have started experimenting with tables that have functions attached to them, or you're doing OOP coding. You're using some of our Lua OOP examples from prior sessions here, and you think, hey, you know what would be really cool is if I created this awesome object that has functions and stuff attached to it, and I could serialize it, because I read this word. I learned about this when I was in class. Serializing is basically taking an object and massaging it in some way so that you can store it and restore it later instead of having to rebuild it. That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get it into some meta format that you can store, and then take that later and restore it and have it be the object that it was before without having a builder. Well, you can do that, but you're going to have to do some work on how that is done. So in this example, my table has 2 key value pairs. It has a key value pair where I'm using an alternative nomenclature. I'm using the open square bracket quote and then name. This is the same as if I type my table dot name. But if you're writing loops, clearly you can't create this, but you can create this. Well, that's why I'm showing this in the example, is when people want to create loops that iterate through keys, one way to insert the key is between a pair of these square brackets. Similarly, you can just create your tables entries and use the square bracket nomenclature if you prefer. I personally, when initializing tables that have key value pairs where the key is a string, I like the dot notation. So regardless, in this example, we have created a table, an empty table. This table has a name entry and a description entry. The name is gotcha3, and the name or the description is this long string. This table has fields and functions attached to it. Additionally, down here, you see I'm doing something kind of interesting. Using dot notation, I'm saying my table dot dump equals dump. So if we look higher up in this file, we'll see that dump is this function, local function dump, that takes an argument self. It could be anything. It could be obj. the name of this argument is not magic, but people who write Lua code a lot and do this, or people who are coming from C++ or C# or whatever, they prefer the self nomenclature because it tells you something. It's saying that this is an object and it's the object that this function is attached to. Whatever the case may be, I've created a function called dump, and what it does is it takes the argument self and then it prints out self.name, so the field, whatever is in the field name and whatever is in the field description. And what I've done down here basically is I have created a table and assigned it that function. And the thing that's important about this example is what I'm doing is saving memory. I have created one instance of this function, so it takes up a little bit of memory. Of course, it's a very short function, but imagine, if you will, you have a function that's got 1,000 lines in it, for whatever case, for whatever reason it may be. It's a huge function, very complicated. I could create it once and assign it over and over to tables, or I could do something much less efficient, which is, if you will, I could, for every time that I create a table, I could have code like this, which is I'm creating a brand new function every time I create a new table. Now, if you create 10,000 table entries, you get 10,000 functions where each one is unique, which is great. That's fast when it executes, but not so great in that it uses a lot of memory. So I keep giving these tips as I'm going along, which is probably a little bit confusing to the listener, but the tip here is if you're going to create functions and attach them to tables, and it is possible, it's not always possible to do it this way, if it is possible, if you don't have to have some kind of unique knowledge of that table or details prior to the construction of the table, then create the function once and assign it as a function attached to the table. So again, we have a table, 2 fields, and a function. So the gotcha in this case is if you try to use the traditional straightforward saving function, which basically JSON encodes the table, the JSON encode will fail when you try to JSON encode the table because JSON cannot understand what to do with a function, nor can it understand what to do with certain meta properties like advanced indexes, things like that. So let's go ahead and run this example where we're going to initialize the table, give it these values, and we are going to dump them out using our dump function from the prior example. And then we're going to, I'm sorry, yes, okay, and then we will, why am I doing this? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. In test 1, we're going to run the dump function, which is the one we attach to the object, to see what it does. And then in test 2, I'm going to actually dump the table itself. I know I should have given it a different name. And what that will do is just iterate over every entry and show us what's there. So let me just run that. The good thing is you don't have to understand what I'm saying. You can get this code, and it's pretty short. You can walk through it. So the first function runs, it prints out the name, gotcha3, and it prints out the description. And then the second test here runs, and it does the thing that we saw earlier, and it goes through every index, every key, and it prints out what is assigned to that key. So description this, dump is a function whose name is encoded as a string, and it's pointing to some function. So this is another nice thing about the dump function that I'm including with the library is you can see, oh, I've got 3 functions attached to this, so this is good, or this has got 1, so it's what I expected. So moving on, let's go ahead and I'm going to comment out the test. So we're going to initialize, and then I'm going to try to save, load, and I'm going to run the test again that runs the function attached to the object. Get my Windows running here. And I expect a loud beep. Not too loud on your side, probably. So I get an error, and the error says, gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Line 24. Okay, so what's it complaining about? Let's look at it. Gotcha 3, line 24. Oh, well, it doesn't like this. Okay, well, what is it saying? It's saying dump a string value, yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, I can't find it. What is this? You're telling me this is a function. I can't find it. What has happened? I take this and I get rid of it, and I run this, which is the table dumping function. I actually look at the console output. Saving the table, loading the table. Okay, let's see. Description is a string. This table has field. Dump. Dump. What the heck is this? It doesn't know. So JSON, actually this is smarter than JSON used to be. JSON used to crash. See, I think they have made improvements to the Lua 5.2 or whatever it is that it is attached, because Lua used to quit in the save. It used to say, I have no idea what you want me to do. I can't save this. Now it saves. It's like, I don't know what, it's a function. I'm just going to put something in here. Tough luck, it's gone. So basically what it has done is it's saved and restored. And now all I know is that dump used to point to a function, but it's not really a function. So what do I do? What I used to do before this didn't just die, was I used a more advanced saving function, which used the deep strip copy. So it would go through and remove all functions, all special indices, and other meta junk that used to kill JSON. So I'm just going to run it. But before I do, actually, I'll show you the code. So save2 is now using a call to tlib2. At the top of my file here, I included tlib and tlib2, so I could use both in the example. Where tlib is the old save, and tlib2, let me find it, is the new save, which looks very, very similar, except it's got this one extra line where it deep strip copies the table and saves the temporary version of that table, which is returned by deep strip copy. So, sorry, save2, where are we? So save2 is using the new version of save, the better version of save. And then in load2, it's using the load from tlib2, which is actually the same as the one in tlib1, but I included it here because I want people to be able to, at the end of the day, say, okay, and just take tlib2 and start using it, so they don't have to assemble anything on their own. So we're going to load it, and then my function here is smart enough to know what I as the developer here, know that what I'm really trying to do is serialize this object. And to properly serialize it on the restore, or deserialize it, I guess you could say, I need to reattach that function, which is another benefit of defining the function elsewhere, because then you can merely reassign it as a field to the table when you restore it. So to be clear, I'm saving it and stripping out the function and all the other junk that makes JSON choke. When I restore it, all it's going to have is the two data fields, name and description. And then before I try to do anything else with it, I'm going to reassign dump the function. So it's going to be basically what it used to be. It'll be a new table containing the same data and attached to the same function. Let's make sure I've saved everything here. And let's bring up the console. Right, and so I run it. It says saving the table, loading the table, and I should change my example to say case 3. And then I run the test function here, and that produces, where is it? That produces the output, gotcha 3, this table has fields and functions attached to it, which is the original functionality of this.
Wow.
So, and I will correct this code a little bit and resave it so that by the time people see this link, everything will be correct. So, any questions? Did I totally go too far on this example, or?
Does anybody got any questions?
No, I think the important thing that people need to realize is that when you're working with functions and storing a function inside of an array or a table, like what Ed's showing us how to do here, is that you do need to reattach it. That process of conversion into saving it as a JSON file messes things up, and it changes everything into a string or a quote instead of keeping its functionality as a function.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, Ed? Did I summarize that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this is just a trap that people fall into. They get to be sort of like pseudo-advanced Lua coders, and then they have this great idea. They say, hey, it'd be great if I could make my levels, maybe drag some things around on screen, and then save them and restore that level later. And then they get stuck because they're like, well, I've got this complicated display object that I want to save, or I've got a Lua table that I want to save, and how do I can't save it. It's not saving, it's not restoring. And so what I'm telling them is the problem is you've got to reattach the functionality.
Right.
You've got to think ahead to what that data looks like when it comes back off the disk.
Yes.
The idea of serializing and deserializing is a very powerful and smart way to approach your game development, but you've got to know what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you're just saving things straight out, then you're probably not going to run into these issues. But like you said, if you're trying to make it more sophisticated mechanism,
right. 90% of people just use tables to save data, and they're going to run into gotcha too.
Right.
Then the other 10% who are trying to make little mini editors in their game or things like that, they're going to run into gotcha 3.
Right. And this is actually a protection of the system, that you need to reattach the function inside your code. This is going to keep things from maliciously being downloaded and functions being added to your game. It'll help protect you from being hacked, basically.
Right. I mean, because you can, right, absolutely. You're not going to, we've been, in this example, saving all of the JSON encoded data on your local device. Well, you don't need to save JSON data locally. You can save it in a database someplace. You can get it from some arbitrary location. And you sure as heck don't want to have executable code somehow being able to get into your app.
Right. So Gotcha 3 is actually a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm not complaining. At the end of the day, I do wish I could do it, but
but for security,
I'm always looking for the
protecting your apps. Yeah, this is a good thing to have.
There you go, and that's the that'll be the theme for today's show. We'll leave that there. The machine that won't boot is a secure machine.
Right.
So a brick is a secure machine.
A brick is a secure device.
Oh.
Well, thanks, Ed, for putting those examples together. That's a lot of work, and we appreciate you highlighting all that stuff. Even though, like you said, one of those examples, the number gap index thing now is working. I'm sure there's somebody who has run across that or will potentially run across something very similar in the future. At least now they know that, oh, I'm not insane, and I can I can look for it. So
it used to be we had to throw if-thens in and to check for non-existent or nil and change that to null and do all kinds of stuff, and now that problem's gone.
I just want to say, I'm actually happy it's not a gotcha. You know what that means?
That's right.
It's little tiny things that Corona, the developers there, are improving. They're like, oh, why should we put up with this? Let's just fix it. Maybe they don't get credit. Maybe it was the Lua guys. But the point is that this is improving as we go along.
Right.
Yeah. Things should get better over time for sure. That's a good. Well, hey, thanks for that. Thanks for putting all that together, and thanks for being here today. We will talk about shuffling items in the Lua table next time, and I am trying to get. I haven't actually reached. I've connected with him on Facebook yet, but I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet. But this past weekend there was an iWatch hackathon in San Francisco, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And at that event, someone developed a fart app for the iWatch.
Oh, well, you need one of those.
Because your arm needs to fart, yes.
So, well, and we're going to talk about, if we can get them on the show, we're going to talk about the concepts around the iWatch and how it interacts with your iPhone or your iPad. And then, because I can imagine that at some point in the future, I don't know exactly when, but I could see that Corona would be supportive of this. Not necessarily the farting part, but the iWatch platform. So we want to get him on the show and kind of talk about his experience and sort of get some ideas about where he thinks the platform's going to go. So hopefully we'll do that soon. If you are interested in such an app, you can go to www.fart.watch.
Oh God.
Which brings up the question. Time
to bring back all those old apps?
Have you? Brian's rubbing his eyes. Have you registered your .watch domain yet? If you have an idea for the iWatch, a .watch domain may not be such a bad idea. Especially if you can grab, something like fart.
Or game.
Or game. Yeah, game.watch. So
I just want to say though, isn't it called the Apple Watch? Have you seen the College Humor?
Yeah.
The College Humor channel, don't call it the iWatch.
It's the Apple Watch, you're right. And I keep calling it the iWatch. I can't stop calling it the iWatch. So I don't care what they say. I'm just going to be one of those cranky old men who calls it the iWatch.
This is a spoiler, so if you're listening you don't want to know and you want to watch the College Humor video, I love that's why we don't want you to call it the iWatch. Oh, God, now you got me doing it.
Oh, well, look for that coming soon. Hopefully we'll get him on the show. That'll be fun. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. Have a great week, and happy coding.
Bye.
Either.